watched that with them.
Yeah.
That was great.
All right, we are live, folks.
All right.
Excellent, excellent.
Sorry for the delay.
Brother, thank you so much for doing what you do. It wouldn't happen without you. You know that on so many levels. So anyway, all right, here we go. And by the way, we're starting here at, we're going to call it 12:25. So we're going to do a hard stop at 13:30 or 12:38. And then take a quick break there. And so, in and out. All right.
Breathe.
Seatbelts, here we go. Welcome back to an amazing episode of Ultra Life Today. This will be part one of an airing, and then we'll do a couple of more parts later on. I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne. We have a guest.
Adam, we've got a treat for our viewers and listeners today because this also goes out over the radio airwaves. We've got Dr. Deanna Wyndham in house. It's a beautiful day in Oklahoma. We've had an amazing rainy season here. And Dr. Deanna Wyndham has kind of become, I would say, a integrated into our family and a team member. And Adam, that's all I can say about it. She's going to make a trip with us to Canada in the future to a conference that's going to be a really interesting departure for us. But Dr. Wyndham, we welcome you once again to Ultra Life Today, and we're going to have what we call a spontaneity session today. Can you say that fast 3 times, Adam?
I'm the least spontaneity person.
You had your endo lift though, so I'm counting on you.
I'm really, I'm not feeling much spontaneity right now. My brain is kind of stuck.
All right,
it's going to open eventually. Right. You know, I find that these conversations always open up some new avenue of discussion.
Of course they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Yeah, hey.
And don't be afraid.
You're sandwiched between us here. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid of eating the mic either. Okay. We want our listeners to be able to. And you can scoot up a little if you want. I can see Adam just fine.
Yep, real good.
He and I are a little taller than you, so it's pretty easy with you.
You can
being
look
in the
over
studio.
me most of the time because I'm a munchkin.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to mention as a prelude to this, that in me learning a little bit about Dr. Wyndham over the years, if you haven't gone back and looked at the archived episodes we have with Dr. Wyndham, you're going to realize that she, like so many practitioners, Adam, has gone through an intense health journey and continues to go through transitions in her own health, learning about her own health and how to deal with her health challenges. And I don't think it would hurt our audience to have you try to give maybe an encapsulated recap of some of what you've been through so that they can, like me, identify with you and go, oh my gosh, this lady is not some researcher that's out there in a lab doing things with test tubes. She's lived a difficult life of transitioning through her own journey of health stuff. So again, welcome to the broadcast. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. First of all, I appreciate everything that you guys do, and I love being here with both of you, and I love the direction that our talks take. By way of introducing my experiences with health and life, I would say that, you know, my health journey began before I can remember, because as an infant I was sick and my mom didn't know why.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had a mysterious rash that would crack and bleed sometimes.
Oh, wow.
She took me to multiple doctors, and I think I was around 8 or 9 when they finally diagnosed it as psoriasis.
Oh.
Which now we know is autoimmune, but at the time I don't believe that was
pediatric
understood.
Psoriasis, it's rare.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And
not anymore. But it was back then, right?
Right. It's all autoimmune diseases of all types are becoming more common, and there are some reasons for that we can talk about if you'd like. But that developed psoriasis developed into psoriatic arthritis and irritable bowel syndrome and
leaky gut syndrome probably came along. Yeah.
Right. And autoimmune urticaria, which is basically just hives caused by autoimmune disease, but it's awfully hard to treat that. And the symptoms that most autoimmune people experience, which is chronic fatigue and brain fog and chronic joint pains or chronic body pains, these were things that I lived with. And I was in track when I was growing up and had to drop out of track during my senior year because the pain and the fatigue were just so significant that I could no longer maintain track. Although I did keep running when I was able. I just wasn't always able. I did it for fun rather than competition at that point.
Do I remember, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, that there was some beautiful familial connection with a grandparent that actually was a catalyst in your early journey to trying to discover health, and then maybe you look back on that moment as something that propelled you on your journey to learning about something outside the conventional medical paradigm. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it is. So
Remind us of that, because it's cool.
It's my mom's mom and my dad's dad. So those two grandparents were, my mom's mom was more of like, she would do like kitchen herbs or, put things in a pot and then feed it to us. You know, and it was
so real natural medicine.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think my grandmother would have defined it as any sort of medical treatment.
It's just legacy and part of health. My mom used to be given black draft, as she calls it, 3 or 4 times a year, and then they would even do fasting and stuff. And I'm like, where did they get that? And she's like, these just always were done in our family for generations.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah,
but it had a benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a huge benefit. Now we know how great these things are and how important intermittent fasting is and how it improves health and overall longevity. Healthy longevity by years by intermittent fasting. I mean, that's...
So, Adam, you being a pharma guy, I have to ask you about this.
Got the lights.
Because this, and here we go.
And here we go. Now we're
alive today. You can actually see us now.
Now you can see us.
Adam, I used to run around with an FDA auditor guy, and we would audit supplement manufacturing facilities, contract manufacturing facilities. And he said...
To try to find one that would work right.
Exactly. Yeah. And he said, like ours, by the way. Anyway, he said, Josh, do you realize that the original pharmacopoeia consisted of all these different herbs and everything? And then he said, when the advent of what we call conventional medical today, or allopathic medicine came in, he said that was changed completely as in the advent of pharmaceutical drugs. And I was shocked to realize, and you know this, Adam, because you were working with some stuff that was grandfathered in because of early pharmacopoeia stuff, right, in the herbal space.
You can find
amazing?
All sorts of herbal remedies in the monographs in the that are grandfathered in as drugs that can be used for treating all sorts of things, and those are because these were inherited pharmaceutical interventions from the 1800s to 1700s,
right. And those were the tools of those early practitioners. That's what they used when they prescribed a medication. And it was a plant.
Even the homeopathic pharmacopoeia is recognized in the United States as a drug where you can actually make, if you have a homeopathic drug, you can sell it as a treatment for a disease.
Right. Deanna had a light bulb go off. I want to hear what she's going to say because she almost jumped into the microphone.
I've been dying to say something here. So there's actually, this is really intriguing. I have one of these older books. My aunt gave it to me, and it actually lists all of these really interesting, like herbs and homeopathics. And it's only around, I believe, the turn of the last century when Western medicine started being defined as a business. And
the American Medical Association.
And the early advent of the Rockefeller influence in the Rockefeller School of what we call the Rockefeller School of Medicine these days.
And their whole plan with Western medicine was to turn it into, was to eliminate the things that big business could not make money on, and homeopathics, big business can't make money on it because anybody can make those.
Yeah, you can't patent these unique God-given things.
Right.
Interesting.
And so the whole goal was to eliminate everything that couldn't be patented, to call only those patentable things as true medicine, and to train doctors in the business of medicine. And so now, 100 years later, not quite, I guess,
pretty close though. Yeah.
Now we've got this system where doctors don't understand the training that we're getting. I call medical school a form of brainwashing, because they literally tell us that we're not allowed. They scare us that we're not allowed to look outside of what we're taught in medical school, that it's, that you're a quack if you do, that, you're not looking at real medicine anymore. There's so many ways that they kind of get it into our heads that all of these things are no longer valid.
Right.
And that you have to go with these scientifically proven pharmaceutical remedies, and that if you're not doing that, you're not practicing real medicine.
Adam,
it's a disservice.
I said this was going to be a spontaneous section, Adam, that we were going to have today, but I'm so glad that we touched on this, because there are so many people that I still meet, Adam, because I have the opportunity to interact with a lot of doctors and their staffs. There's so many people I meet out there that may go into a health food store occasionally. I meet customers in health food stores as well that are like, this is the first time I've ever even considered taking a vitamin. And I'm like, what have you done all your life? And they say, I grew up going to Dr. So-and-so on Main Street in this small town, and they were our family doctor for 30 years, and then we developed these problems, we had these surgeries, and it's like, I think it is very important for people to hear, Adam and Deanna, that there was a history of what we now call alternative medicine. Why do we call it that? It should be mainstream, just like all these therapies should be able to integrate together. But I think it's really important for our listeners and our viewers to understand that there's a rich and deep history of practicing medicine that came before things turned into the allopathic medical world that we talk about today, so they don't have to be scared of the things that we might recommend that we've seen. And Adam, your world, you came from doing clinical trials of things to prove them, so that they could finally be recommended by a doctor.
Well, there's a whole path to getting a drug approved in the United States. It's a system that is designed to prove that you have something that is safe and will actually derive a statistically relevant benefit to a human with an official diagnosis of a particular disease or condition. And that system is regulated and is scrutinized, and every doctor that goes through medical school is essentially indoctrinated into this way of thinking that they need to have first a diagnosis that then gives them a treatment plan.
Right.
And then, God forbid, that doctor would deviate from what is the whatever the gold standard is for a treatment plan for that patient, because they are liable under malpractice. If they deviate from that plan, they could be sued. And so you have a combination of our litigious society, doctors that are afraid of deviating from a particular plan, and the costs of actually getting a drug approved in our society. It's gone up. It's right now it's at least $500 million to get a drug approved in the United States for a disease.
So you've been listening to Adam Payne, CEO of Ultra Botanica, Dr. Deanna Wyndham. You can contact her through wholehumanlife.com. That's WHOLE, humanlife.com. There's also an 800 number, 888-338-3408. Again, this is Ultra Life Today, and we're going to be back in just a moment with our next segment.
Well, that was a downer end of that segment, huh?
It was horrible.
That's horrible.
Shall I re-record that real quick?
No,
Let him
no, it's good.
Anyway, It was.
It's a dark tunnel that we're going through, and it's hopeless. So let's just crawl into a corner and die.
Right.
Well,
no. But again, we're going to pick, and that was a beautiful segue because Adam, you eloquently described what I call the funnel, the conventional funnel that is there,
diagnosis, treatment,
that
right.
hinders a medical practitioner in the United States from actually practicing
functional medicine.
Yes. So it's a beautiful opportunity for you to take up that story. Okay.
Yeah. So now we can talk about the advent of functional medicine and what's changed.
Yeah. And I think this is a very interesting broadcast. I think it's lovely, it's conversational, and it's historical. And we haven't gotten to do a lot of history on this.
No,
so,
we haven't. All
right. We're going to start at 12:40. We'll be out at 12:53 and a half. So here we go. Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bellew.
Adam Payne here, and we are continuing our discussion with Dr. Deanna Wyndham. Doc, what is your technical fellowship that you got? What are you medical people? You guys you go training through fellowships. You get board certified. What do you have?
Yeah.
Where did you get indoctrinated?
Right. So
and don't hesitate to get a little closer to the mic. Okay. We want to make sure everyone can hear you. If you need to scoot your chair up, we're good.
Me.
Yes, no problem.
So
I love that you move around and talk with your hands and are animated.
Yeah, I try to hold on to something so I don't hit things.
Us. Okay.
So I'm actually board certified in family practice.
Okay.
So when I graduated from medical school 20 years ago, there were no fellowships in integrative or functional medicine.
So the IFM wasn't around.
Right.
And the A4M wasn't around.
Well, A4M was around, but they weren't offering any sort of fellowship.
Oh, interesting.
So I was already getting continuing, even when I was in my residency, I was getting continuing medical education in bioidentical hormones.
Oh, interesting.
And I was going to these conferences in integrative medicine, and I was getting, when you're a resident, you can't really get credits for that, but I was doing hours in those to get concurrent training in it, but it was nothing that was recognized by the American Medical Association or the American Osteopathic Association.
Understood.
So my training started long before we had those, and even before Andrew Weil had his functional medicine program at the University of Arizona.
Oh,
so
interesting. When did that happen? When did Wild start that?
That happened about 10 to 12 years ago.
Oh, so it's still relatively new.
Right. And so that happened about 8 to 10 years into my career. And so I actually started my career at Whitaker Wellness. And Dr. Whitaker was a huge name in the integrative or functional or complementary and alternative.
Yeah.
Those early days.
He's an iconic pioneer that actually, for the first time, because of maybe his personality, his demeanor, introduced people that knew nothing about functional and integrative medicine to that world, and he was so believable that people were like, there's something here that resonates.
Well, it's results. Right? It's not only that; it's the results that people were getting.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So you were in a true apprenticeship with him and absorbing all of his world for how many years were you there?
14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a residency, huh?
Yeah, it was. It was an intense fellowship training because people would leave, and Dr. Whitaker, because of who he was and just so dynamic, and he would reach out to the rest of the community, and very often we would know, the vitamin C research that came out for IV vitamin C for cancer that was coming out of the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Oh, wow. We
were the first ones to hear about that research and to implement it even before the papers came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
that's
really
exciting.
Fun. Yeah, it was really fun and exciting.
Talk about a John the Baptist, somebody that was putting their head on the chopping block.
So you guys must have felt like you were on the cutting edge of new things and exciting.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fun.
It was so much fun. And we would have people that would come from, all over the country and even all over the world, and that would come to Whitaker Wellness. And we had people that would literally leave their hospital beds to fly or drive to Whitaker Wellness and be treated.
Wow.
And it was intimidating and scary at times.
Because these are really very
these
sick.
are very sick people. We would see people. I had a patient with autoimmune urticaria that was so bad that her throat was closing and she could barely breathe. She was dying in the hospital, and she in Northern California, and she left the ICU to come to Whitaker Wellness because they were just giving her Benadryl and EpiPens, just over and over and over again. I've never seen anybody have higher doses than her.
That's bad.
Yeah, and that was scary when she came into me and said, I left the ICU and I've had this much EpiPens and this much Benadryl. It was all I could do to keep a straight face and not run from that room.
So what happened?
So we treated her with IVs and with acupuncture and hyperbaric and IV MSM. We actually did stabilize her, and
Wow.
she remained stable and out of the hospital for about 10 years the last time that I spoke to her, and I haven't seen her in several years
I
now.
want to say so many expletives right now. That's incredible.
It is. Deanna, this gets kind of, I'm putting you on the spot here, but again, the nature of today's broadcast, I think, is so important for people to hear this. But you and I were talking in the break room before we came in here today, and you mentioned to me how unbelievably scary and frightening it was in these early days of your practice. And we were talking about both of us kind of being more shy and retiring, and it takes something to get us out there, interacting with the world. And you tell me what it's like, tell our listeners what it's like to have someone walk into your office and say, you're my last hope. If this doesn't work, I'm going to take my life. I mean, when you shared that with me, and I think it's important for us to talk about this today because I'm kind of getting a little teary-eyed. I know there's people listening that have felt that very same way. So would you address how that felt, but then also give a little hope injected into this audience?
Absolutely. And forgive me if I am a little bit emotional. I have been there myself.
Wow.
Just as a person and as somebody who was looking for answers, and at times the only thing that kept me going was because I was a mom, and I didn't want to give up on myself.
And how hard is that? You're being a mom too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when people come into me, first of all, when people come into my office, I feel, and I know a lot of doctors that are integrative like myself, they have a calling to this. They're not just practicing medicine, they have a calling. And I think that's true of most doctors that go into functional or integrative medicine.
Yeah.
And when people come into my office, I feel like they come into my family. So these are people that I am highly motivated to help because they're part of my human family and part of my, I love them when they
now
come in.
Now I understand the name of your company, Whole Human Life.
Yes.
It's beginning to make more sense to me. Keep going.
Yes.
This is great.
And so when somebody tells me that, immediately my heart just goes out to them, and because I feel this with them, and I feel the pain, the despair, the just absolute, just dire need to come up with an answer because life is not worth living in the way that they're living it. And I know what that feels like. But in my mind, there is always an answer. And Dr. Whitaker really taught me this, because if I don't know it, because I can't possibly know everything. There's no possible way. But if I don't know it, there is somebody who does.
That's so
and
cool.
So reaching out to the community, one of the major things that Dr. Whitaker did for me was teach me how to reach out to other doctors and other practitioners. And so one of the things that I have is connections with other doctors and other practitioners, because they're not all doctors around the country, and somebody knows what to do and can help. There's always an answer.
And the cool thing is you really do have answers, and you've amassed this knowledge base from relationships with other people. You and I had a very personal phone call one time, Deanna, And after the phone call, I started thinking of you as Deanna Sherlock Holmes Wyndham. Because in talking to you, and Adam and I have talked to a lot of practitioners, and they really like to stay in their lane. And you said, Josh, when someone comes to me with a mystery, it intrigues me, it fascinates me, and I want to get to the bottom of what that mystery is to be able to help them with their health. And I was like, this is so cool. I
actually love a good mystery.
Okay.
I do. And that's what I see a lot of.
You see hard cases.
I see
a lot of times, right? That may have been to other people. And then they come to you, and you're having to assemble these puzzle pieces.
Right. It's beautiful. I mean, it's such, you get symptoms. You have some really neat testing systems that you use that can give you insight into the metabolomic and the genomic and whatever other kind of omic that you want to look at here. And these, honestly, these omic tools. I mean, these are tests that are really only come into their own in the last 5 to 10 years, because we're able to look at things in the body. These cytokines, chemokines, SNPs, these genomic tests that really have only been available in the last decade.
They've actually been available for a couple decades, but doctors haven't been using them much.
Well, the costs have been
outrageous.
astronomical, and the breadth of information around what these different pieces of information mean have eluded us.
Right.
And now it's you have such a wider palette to pick from.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I often say is that I have more tools in my tool belt than most doctors do.
Yeah.
So there's these testing facilities around the country that have that's why I call it integrative medicine. I know there's complementary and alternative, there's functional, which are very good names.
Orthomolecular, I'll throw a new one in.
Ooh,
yes.
Orthomolecular.
Which actually has an incredible history. Sometimes
it does.
It's like the word gazebo, one of my favorite words.
I actually work with Father Brian, rector there.
Wow.
And he likes the name of orthomolecular medicine. He uses that preferentially. But I like integrative. And the reason I like that name is because I always say that I integrate in everything that's scientifically and research proven. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that says what I do and what type of medicine it is.
Oh, interesting.
And there are so many research validated forms of testing. Like even just a simple test like an organic acid test. I tell people a lot that whenever we're testing, like if we pull your blood out of your body, it is then dead. Blood that, your cells don't live outside of your body. So we're basically testing your dead cells.
Okay, and this is going to be a beautiful segue to go. I so want to talk to you about some tests. I'm remembering some conversations we've had. We've got about 45 seconds left here, and I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you. This is Dr. Deanna Wyndham of WholeHumanLife.com, WHOLE, humanlife.com. There's a 800 number, 888-338-3408. Our conversation has taken some interesting turns today, and I hope it's touching people's heartstrings and recognizing there's hope. There are answers out there, and there's people like Dr. Deanna Wyndham here in Oklahoma and around the country that can help you. I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne. This is Ultralife Today.
Much better transition. I feel so much better. Of course, I was just sorry about tearing up on that one, and I saw it happen.
So genuine.
Just like,
yeah, it's good.
My goodness,
You okay?
I've got something in my eyes.
I feel like there were people today that were on their last ditch hope that are going to be hearing this, and I think it was just so timely that we had that brief conversation in the
people are isolated.
Yeah.
They're and doctors we with the cancer stuff, we hear pretty much every day somebody calling us saying, the doctors just sent my niece home, my daughter home, my wife home with a prescription for narcotics. They're saying there's nothing more that we can do. Yeah. And they feel so disenfranchised. They feel so alone. And really it's, the medical system has said, you need to just trust us. Just do what we're telling you to do. Don't do anything else. If you do something else, we're going to drop you. And then they do everything that they can do, and then they drop them.
Okay, Adam. This stuff is gold. Stop. I'm being Mike Gannon right now. Don't you do that. He's another producer that we interact with. Okay, we're going to start at 12:55 here in just a few seconds. So take a drink of something if you have something and all that good stuff.
Nom.
Pretend to drink.
Yep.
Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. I am Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne.
Adam, when we go to break sometimes, we have the most lively discussions, and I'm thinking...
You mean the stuff that goes between the segments?
Exactly.
The interstitial conversation.
Right, there you go. Another new word today, word of the day, interstitial. So anyway, we went out on the last segment, and by the way, I want to make sure you all know how to get a hold of Dr. Deanna Wyndham. Get a hold of, how oaky can you be? WholeHumanLife.com, WHOLE, humanlife.com. In this segment, I want us to move back into, you were just starting to talk about such things as organic acid tests and diagnostic testing.
Yeah.
And I feel
so
like...
we're picking up a conversation. People are joining us, and it's been a week.
Right,
since
exactly.
We're continuing this discussion. And we were talking about all the different tests that you have available to help bring to bear information that can help you come up with a treatment plan for people.
Yeah, and there's a mystery about these tests, Adam, because we're all used to going to the big names out there to get our blood drawn. So we're going to move back into what you were talking about. And then a doctor will have these routine panel of tests that they do. And then you meet people like Dr. Wyndham, and she's like, oh, you mean they didn't order a reverse T3 for your thyroid and this and that? And I'm like, it's like, then you talk to your conventional doctor and they have no idea about these tests. So help us with some understanding. You were mentioning something that intrigued me. It's like you draw blood from someone and now you have what you call dead blood. Where were you going with that? Because I also want you to give some practical information by helping people understand that some of these tests can be covered by insurance. Some they are going to pay for out of pocket, but what they will learn may actually be the key to the beginning of them getting well, right? So talk to us about that mystery of dead blood and stuff, and tell us about some tests.
Well, it's really so intriguing because almost every person I have ever seen that has been really sick, whether they knew what it was or not, and lots of times they don't know what it is, they come to me and say, my doctor says my labs are normal, but I feel horrible.
Oh, yeah.
And,
wow.
You've
opened up such a can of worms. Keep going.
Right. And the problem is that we're not just that we're testing dead blood, which I will get back to,
okay.
But just the fact that, like I said, as an integrative doctor, I say I have more tools in my tool belt. There are many more scientifically validated tests to look at what we call SNPs, ways that our genetics are misfunctioning, if you will, or to look at environmental toxicities, or to look at chronic infections, or to look at organic acids.
Wow.
I often say that if you were a car, your organic acids would be your emissions. So this is what's coming from your live cells, what they're eliminating.
That's beautiful.
And from what your live cells are eliminating, we can tell what they're doing and what they're struggling with. So, and these are scientifically validated tests. I know I keep saying that, but it's so important because I have people that will go back to their doctor and will say, well, Dr. Wyndham, my doctor says that this free T3, they don't even know what it is. Why is it important? It's not important for my thyroid. Or this organic acid test, they've never heard of it. And so it's not important. And just because a doctor doesn't know something doesn't mean it's not important.
Right.
And that's true for me too.
Wow.
I learn something new almost every day from something a patient has taught me.
Oh, interesting.
And that's not because they went to medical school.
Right.
And I don't have to take that as, some sort, meaning that I'm not good enough as a doctor. It means that there is a world of information out there. And there's no single brain that can hold it all.
We're all pieces of the puzzle, right?
Right.
Wow.
And we all have things that we can learn.
Sometimes
from
the
each other.
patient's gone through such a journey and they've finally come to a realization, or a revelation is probably a better term, of something that's going on with their body, either a food or an environmental factor or some inherited trait that is contributing to the presentation of some sort of symptom. And sometimes those are revelations, because you go, wow, I had no idea that this could contribute to this being a concurrent issue. Fibromyalgia, just as a big catch-all for a syndrome that has been going on in people's lives. I remember a decade ago when I was working heavily in autoimmune diseases, the community of doctors was most of them were considering fibromyalgia to be a form of depression. Had nothing to do with any kind of immunology occurrence going on, and they were treating people with antidepressants.
Yep.
And completely ignoring, essentially saying that this is a psychiatric issue, not an immune cell functional issue.
My doctor in college actually diagnosed me with fibromyalgia and walked me up to the psychiatry department.
You're kidding.
I am not joking. I was crying because he told me that I'm clearly depressed and overworked. I was a single mom. I was going to college. I was going to college full time and had a job and had a daughter. And he said I was depressed and I didn't want to go to the psychiatry department. So he walked me there himself to put me on antidepressants. And as soon as he left me there, I also left because it did not feel right to me.
Right. I remember I was working with a research lab that was studying fibromyalgia, and they took out the cerebral spinal fluid of people with fibromyalgia, and it was there that they saw elevated cytokines. And I remember there was a patient that was pointing at the report that was coming out of the lab saying, look, I told you I had something going on. You wouldn't believe me that this was real. Look, these are elevated. Look, and just with such fury and passion, pointing out that they were really experiencing something. It wasn't a psychiatric issue. It was an immune issue with elevated cytokines in the cerebral spinal fluid.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's so frustrating and disempowering to know that there's something wrong, to feel that there's something wrong inside your body, and for somebody to be telling you that because they can't see it with their limited tests that it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, yeah.
Boy.
Wow.
That's it. That is something that a lot more and more people are experiencing. And even in real things, real things that Western medicine doctors will recognize, like cancer. I just spoke to a patient yesterday that has cancer, and he's dealing with some abdominal issues that the doctors say have nothing to do with his cancer, but those symptoms are more bothersome than the cancer symptoms for him.
Incredible.
And he has actually very classic symptoms of something we call SIBO, S-I-B-O, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it's actually, he's classic. He could have written the book on SIBO with his symptoms, but his doctors are missing it.
Did you help him figure out how to make yogurt at home? I'm kidding. we'll talk about that another time.
Yes.
Because I know you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay. But so you have these mysteries that you solve. You use these tools that are diagnostic tools. You mentioned, and if this is a weird departure, you guys take me away from this, but I'm hearing so much these days, and then you brought it up to me about doing tests related to stool samples and things like that, and how that may be one of the things that you routinely say, this is one of the, now correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering this wrong, that you routinely with maybe a lot of your people say, this is one of the first tests we do. Why do you do that? What is that test, and what do you learn from it?
It's one of my top 3.
Okay, and that's what I was hoping, your top 3 here for our viewers to go, okay, well, if anything at all, probably need to go,
You know,
go do this.
So, in my opinion, the microbiome in our gut is kind of one of the foundations of our health, right?
Absolutely.
Right, and so you have to start there, because if the microbiome's out of balance, everything's out of balance.
Yeah, so people don't understand the importance of the microbiome. A lot of people have heard about it. We know there's lots of gut bacteria. A lot of people have heard that the genetics of the microbiome outnumber our human genetics by 10 to 1.
Yeah.
But what does that really mean? And there are some really important impacts of that. So one, our human genetics get exchanged with microbiome genetics.
That's crazy.
So if you think about that, this is one brilliant way that humans are capable of adjusting to our environment. Because with one meal, your microbiome starts to adjust. And as your microbiome adjusts, your human genetics can adjust. That's the power of the microbiome. And then the microbiome has its fingers in everything, I always say. Your immune system, 80% of your immune system is in your gut, where your microbiome is. Your hormones, 20% of your hormones are made in your gut, and the rest of your hormones get exchanged through your gut.
Oh, interesting.
Up to 80% of your neurotransmitters that your brain uses to function are made in your gut.
Oh, wow.
And the mitochondria, which are the so-called powerhouse of the cell, it's what makes energy for your body to function. The mitochondrial energy is in part regulated by the microbiome, and not to mention the genetic aspect.
With a couple of minutes left here, I want to go back to this because I've heard so many interesting things lately from different integrated practitioners about stool samples and what they learn and why they do those. But what do you learn when someone actually goes and does this test that you're talking about, and how's it interpreted, and what do you learn that sets you on a course of treatment?
Yeah, big fun with the microbiome. So we learn the families. We know that there are basic families of the microbiome, and we know where they should be as far as in relation to each other.
This is great information.
And so we get to know, how are those families? Are there some that are overgrown, some that are undergrown, some like subfamilies that are just absolutely missing? We can't even find them. They're gone. I have a patient with MS, and her microbiome is decimated.
Wow.
Just decimated. I had her run the test twice because I just thought it couldn't be right, but it was.
Oh, wow.
So there's a huge benefit for her to recover and restore a good biome.
Right, exactly. And then so we learn that. We learn if there's inflammation specific to the gut.
Wow.
We learn if the metabolics, how the cells in the gut are working. Is that going right? Is there likely to be an imbalance caused by infections or caused by toxicity? We can see this from looking at the microbiome.
Beautiful.
Wow. My mind is just going in about a bazillion directions.
It's a foundation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, having the microbiome in balance.
So this is, and I'm going to put you on a quick spot with 45 seconds left in this, but the importance you described of the microbiome and what you can learn from a stool sample, when you started saying, we can see this is gone, this, obviously you have some tools to be able to begin to balance those things as well for individuals. But how much of a percentage of a person's overall health how much importance do you put on this test that you just mentioned? You said top 3.
Right. But if I was going to pick one test that I could only do for the rest of my life, it would be looking at the microbiome.
Okay. That's what I wanted people to hear, because I got that from a previous conversation with you. This is Ultra Life today. You've been listening to Adam Payne. You've been listening to Dr. Deanna Wyndham. You can get a hold of her through wholehumanlife.com. That's WHOLE, humanlife.com. There's an 800 number as well, 888-338-3408. Again, I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne, and this is Ultra Life Today. Stay tuned.
All right, going into this last segment, I'm going to call it Well, I didn't know, but I intuitively knew from that phone conversation with you that this may be the number one test that you do. If somebody says, I can't afford all these tests, you might go, let's do this one.
You know,
and I think it's important for people to hear that, because they're thinking the out-of-pocket paradigm. Adam and I encounter it all the time.
If we
Adam and I are on the phone with cancer patients.
Thing.
Yeah. And so it's like, to me, you've literally talked about gold that can change a person's life, and how much is that really worth to them?
Right.
What do you give up to pay for this test? Or is there a way to code it for insurance to get it done?
Right.
Or people on Medicaid? And you mentioned that to me one time. So I think that would be cool to talk about that and open that door. Okay, so here we go. We're going to call this 1310, which means, if I can do my math in my head again, we're going to be, it so troubles me by looking at the military time. I need 13 and
25
more minutes. So, yeah, thanks, brother. 30. Okay,
here we go.
All right. Welcome back to Ultra Life today with our special guest, Dr. Deanna Wyndham. I always want to call you Dr. Deanna Wisdom. I did this on the first one, and the more I know you, to me it seems so very appropriate. But I am Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne. We've been having a dynamic discussion about different tests that you would do to help guide your approach to a patient. So we talked about the microbiome test. And there are obvious, the obvious interventions are correcting that microbiome or doing things that could help with prebiotics, probiotics, etc. What are the other two tests that are kind of your foundation?
So the second test that I would call foundational would be an organic acid test.
So what is that? Help us understand.
This is great, because I don't know, Adam.
Yeah, and this is one that I would say I didn't use for a long time in my career. I've used it for maybe the last few years, actually. So it's become foundational as I've learned about it. But that's the one looking at live cells, and what they're basically discarding, or what they're getting rid of, which is the organic acid, which we can test in urine. So it's a simple urine test, which is also nice.
Awesome. Yeah. No sticky in my arm. That's
right.
Great.
And you don't have to collect stool, which nobody likes, but most of my patients are willing to do.
Sure.
Because it gives us so much information. And then the third, and the organic acid test is amazing because it tells us, like, some of my patients, we actually start with that one over the stool test because it can tell us if there's a microbiome imbalance, if there's environmental toxicity, if there's chronic infections, if there's mold, if I'm suspecting mold, or if there's a gut problem such that I think Clostridia family might be a problem. On a stool study, we will not find that bacterial overgrowth because it's what we call anaerobic. It's exposed to oxygen and it dies.
Wow.
So on a stool test, we can't find Clostridia. But on an organic acid test, we can find evidence of Clostridia.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, and I want to promise our viewers, because you're going to tell us about one more test and what you learned from that may be different from the other two, why you do it. But we're going to get into, I promise our viewers, we're going to talk about out-of-pocket expenses for these tests. We're going to talk about, can they be coded for insurance? How does that all work in this world? Because everybody is hitting the pocketbook these days with inflation and all that going on.
But I'm curious about this organic acid test.
Okay.
What are the differentials that come out of it? I mean, how many different organic acids are you able to see in this test, and what do the results look like?
So when you get it, I'll be honest, it's a bit confusing.
Okay.
Because you get all of these, like, hypuric acid and all of these names you've never heard of before, even as a doctor.
Oh, wow.
Like, I've not concentrated on these names, and so learning about the organic acid test was kind of starting over.
Are there algorithms that help you in analyzing this?
Yeah, so the company has people that you can call to talk to, and they have classes that you can learn about them, and they put it together for you. So what I try to do with patients is not confuse them too much with all of the details of the tests and the names of the organic acids, because it's confusing even for me sometimes.
Gotcha.
I still call for help.
Love your honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be the smartest
you don't
brain.
need, you don't need to be. I mean, that's why these companies are adding value to what they're providing. So that's cool.
And they have amazing support.
But you can get some detailed conclusions from this.
Absolutely.
That
And it's
really
how
cool.
you put it together. So there's like, depending on the type of organic acid test, like say you order the full test, you're looking at 3 pages of organic acids.
What?
Yeah, so it really gets, and then like I was talking about the Clostridia family. There are 5 or 6 organic acids that tell us if you've got a Clostridia.
So these are
overgrowth,
essentially
and it's how you
organic
put it
acids
together.
that the Clostridium is just differentially outputting.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Right.
Yeah, so you can find an occult Clostridium infection
Mm-hmm.
just because there's the evidence. It has to be there.
Right. And the further evidence is that when you treat it, people get better.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so
because you can treat, and then if it goes away, you're good.
Right. And I have I have several patients that have like autoimmune gastrointestinal issues like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or
fungal infections like that can cause so many issues.
Yeah. So if it's fungal or if it's Clostridia, I always go to or if I think it's either of those, I go to the organic acid test first. And I've had such amazing results with people just after decades of unrelenting problems getting better.
Test number 3, and then again, talking out of pocket and insurance stuff. And I want to mention briefly to our viewers, Dr. Wyndham is going to do something really cool. I mean, obviously, we could all sit and talk with her for hours and hours. She's going to be preparing a series of courses that are going to be online courses. So you can find out more about that at wholehumanlife.com or by calling 888-338-3408. We hope it's in the very near future that she does this. But these pearls of wisdom that we only get a few minutes to talk to her about here, she's going to be able to expound on those and give some practical knowledge there. So look for those things coming. Test number 3, Dr. Wyndham.
Okay, so
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that's going to be a little bit of a letdown here because my test number 3 is going to change based on the person.
Okay,
so
that's fine.
That's not a
based
letdown.
on
That
whether
sounds like
it's
that
cancer
sounds
or
like important
autoimmune
wisdom.
or gut, that
Okay.
third test is
Okay.
going to change.
So mention a couple of them.
So we could be looking for environmental toxins, which
Okay.
can be a very big issue for people. We might be looking for food sensitivities.
Yep.
Okay.
We might be looking for chronic infections of different types. So those would be one of those 3 would be the third.
Okay. Very good. And so what is the cost for these? Because the more I've been around integrative practitioners like you, functional medicine doctors, orthomolecular, all these terms, I've learned that you really need to be willing to pony up and pay the price for these tests because you will probably learn something by doing even one of these tests that you'll never, ever, ever learn by going to a conventional allopathic medical doctor.
Well, they don't know the utility of it.
Exactly.
Right.
It's not in their wheelhouse.
First, let me say I may have done an injustice with my third test now that I think about it.
Oh,
okay.
Because the very first thing I do actually is extensive blood work. And so I utilize the patient's symptoms to create these ICD-10 codes. And from these ICD-10 codes, we can actually usually do a blood test that is covered by insurance and goes to a regular laboratory.
fantastic.
And we're doing lots of times the lab will draw like 12, 15, 20 vials of blood to get all of the blood that I'm requesting for them. Now they don't need to do that, but they do it anyway.
Sure.
So that would be my top test because I can do it on anybody that has insurance. And it gets
And those
covered.
differentials are typically they're informative.
Right. We learn so much. Like just with thyroid, I know, traditional Western, we look at a TSH, that's it for thyroid. But there's also a free T3, a free T4, reverse T3, and sometimes autoimmune testing, which is 2 more tests. So
All
that's 6
covered by
tests
insurance,
that are
'cause I've
covered by
had those
insurance to
done.
look at the thyroid. And people feel like they have thyroid problems, very often do. But it's just not detected by that one test.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's good.
So that gets covered by insurance.
Okay.
Now, things like organic acids and stool studies and food sensitivity testing, lots of times these things can be partially covered if we have the right ICD-10 codes. And so, for anybody who's been there to their doctor, may have heard of these ICD-10 codes. There are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of them.
Wow.
But if we pick the right codes, some insurances, HMOs will not, but some PPO insurances and Medicare will partially cover these tests. So like a stool study can typically cost around $400 to $500.
Okay.
But with Medicare, I believe the cost is $79.
That's reasonable.
Right.
That's
And
amazing.
even if a person is paying $300 to $400 to $500, even if they have to pay cash, I will recommend that they do these tests because we can get so much information. It can be life altering.
No question.
Well, that
So
makes sense.
yeah,
No
it's
question.
the difference of, you know, being able to go to work, to earn a living, to think clearly, to get the sleep that you need, to have functionality in your day.
To have
It's
the
priceless.
appropriate foundation of mood and appropriate reactions to your environment. Yeah.
Deanna,
Absolutely.
I've thought of so many people every time we've had the privilege of interviewing you that are literally on the hamster wheel of their health, and they're doing, and I don't know if Einstein really was the originator of that quote about insanity, you know, the definition is doing the same thing over, and they are continuing to go back to the exact same physician, they're getting the exact same tests, and then unfortunately they're getting those medications that they had, and then they're changing those, and then they're adding new ones, and then new ones come out, and let's try this now.
Well, sometimes
It
the
sounds like-
medications are treating a medication
It
symptom, so
sounds,
it's compound.
it sounds like medical roulette to me. How cool to be able to do 1 to 3 tests and learn more about your health in one. Now when I think about you, I'm going to think about you in a t-shirt that says, when people come in, or a lab coat that says give blood.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. When you mentioned 15 vials, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I've never only had but 6 drawn before. But anyway, again, this is
And
Dr.
you
D.
haven't had enough tests.
Oh, yeah, there you
All
go.
right. Thank you. Okay. I'll give at the office. You have been listening to Dr. Deanna Wyndham. Now, we've got about 4 minutes left in this segment, Adam and Dr. Wyndham. Where would you like to go to wrap up what we've talked about today? We've been in a lot of places, but I want to reemphasize what I think was our second segment, so it would have been a week ago. There is hope for you. Have you gotten some practical answers today from this lovely lady here that is actually going to spark something in you to say, you know what, I need to contact her, or I need to go to whoever my integrative or functional person is, and I need to say, hey, an organic acid test, the stool sample test, the third one you mentioned was
Food sensitivities or
foods.
toxic elements.
Yeah, environmental exposure, things like that, right?
Right.
You know, okay. So here we are, 3.5 minutes. Let's go.
I'm going to
somewhere,
touch
Adam.
on something that really is going to open up a can of worms, and it's your fault.
So it's going to be
Okay.
so this will be the setup for the next
It
time we
will
have
be
her
a
back,
setup.
right?
So,
Okay.
so Doc here called or sent me a text about 2 months ago and said, I just read a book, or I'm reading a book, and you need to take a look at this book because it's changing my thinking. And it was a book by a guy named Christofferson, Tripping Over the Truth.
We're going to talk about
Amazing book.
Warburg and some other people, maybe
So
Seafried.
you made the comment to me after I finished the book, and we still haven't had like a deep discussion about this, right? That your thinking has changed around cancer because the implications of that book, and folks, if there's any book that you could pick up and read this year on your plate, it is this book. It is Tripping Over the Truth by Christofferson. It goes through the history of cancer, research, all of the different paradigms of thinking that have evolved, the current kind of enclaves of genomic, dynamic thinking around cancer, and then this new paradigm, which is actually not a new paradigm,
Right.
about the metabolic origins of cancer. So where are you at today with cancer?
That is a can of worms.
It is.
Oh, and we have a whopping 90 seconds for her to mention this.
So
Adam.
do you subscribe to the metabolic origins of cancer?
Absolutely. It just makes sense.
Okay, but define what
And I
that
think-
means. Some people don't even understand what a metabolic origin would be. So we've got to set this up.
So I'll take one test that was done where they took a cancerous cell and a healthy cell, and they took the nucleus out of the cancer cell and put it into the healthy cell cytoplasm, and they took the unhealthy nucleus out of the cancer cell and put it into the healthy cytoplasm. They switched them around.
Yep.
I think I said that right. And in the current paradigm of thinking that cancer is a genetic disease,
right?
You would think that
it's gonna.
You would think that the unhealthy cancer nucleus would churn the healthy cell into a cancer cell, and
because that's where the genes are.
Because that's where the genes are.
And the reverse was true,
and it actually absolutely the reverse. The unhealthy cancer nucleus in the healthy cell became healthy, and the healthy nucleus in the cancerous cell stayed cancerous.
Right.
Which is saying that cancer originates outside of the nucleus. There's some...
And outside of the genes.
Outside of the genes. That the genes are responding to something else that's going on in the cell.
In the cell, but not in the genes.
Not in the genes, right? Because
Exactly.
Cancer people think, oh, it's a genetic disease. And there's been trillions of dollars, literally trillions of dollars spent at targeting these genetic defects, saying if we can correct the defect, we're going to cure the disease. And it's not true.
Cancer does the same thing as autoimmune disease. You block one genetics, the body finds a way around, and it just keeps on going.
It keeps on going.
Right.
In like 3% of the cases, it actually might make some sort of minimal benefit, but usually not.
No, this cancer patient that I was talking about that I spoke to yesterday his oncologist recommended a drug that she says will extend his life by 2 months.
Costing probably over $100,000.
Right.
You guys are going to break my heart here going down this road.
We're going to have to come back and come back and talk about this.
Do.
Yeah.
So this has been Ultra Life today. This was our last segment with Dr. Deanna Wyndham, Dr. Sherlock Holmes, Deanna Wyndham.
That's good.
And that really loves solving mysteries that patients come to her with. You've seen her humble heart today, where she actually says, I learn from my patients. How refreshing is that to hear that she learns things from her patients every day? So we are all joined together. The way you can get a hold of her, which now I understand more about why your company has named this, wholehumanlife.com, WHOLE, humanlife.com. The number to call, the 800 number, 888-338-3408. Dr. Wyndham, we love you. We want you back soon. Adam does what he normally does. He drops like a ticking time bomb in the last 30 seconds.
You're going to have to come back pretty quickly.
And we promise we're not going to talk about this off air, so it'll be fresh and alive.
Awesome.
And we're so glad.
No, I'm not taking that promise.
Yeah, I know, right? We're so glad you came. Go get the book, Tripping Over the Truth, that Adam mentioned. I've never heard the guy recommend a book before, and I've heard him recommend this book 20 times since Dr. Wyndham got him on it. So thanks again for coming. I'm Josh Bellew.
Adam Payne. This has been Ultra Life Today. We're good.
This is always so much fun.